Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our second Lunchbox talk of the spring semester. We wanted to start by giving a little background on the Lunchbox project. The Lunchbox was conceived by members of the IGB community and is an event series centered on food that consists of monthly seminars from U of I faculty, staff, and community members that are paired with special meals prepared by Veggies Cafe chefs. Since the IGB sits at the intersection of science and society, we sought to highlight the scientific connections within food's sentimental value while exploring how food influences our individual experiences. The Lunchbox seeks to create an inclusive community that encompasses people from different cultural backgrounds. The Lunchbox is sponsored by the Office of the Vice Chancellor for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Archer Daniels Midland, whose purpose is to unlock the power of nature to enrich the quality of life. As a reminder, meal vouchers can be used at any time beyond the seminar date. However, if you want the featured dish, you have one more day to go pick it up at Veggies Cafe. After tomorrow, it will no longer be available. At the conclusion of the seminar, a link to a short survey will be posted in the chat, and your responses will help us improve your experiences. And also, as a bonus, you will be automatically entered into a raffle for a chance to win a gift basket. And now I would like to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Margarita Teran Garcia. She is the Assistant Dean for Integrated Health Disparities Programs here at the University of Illinois. She obtained her MD from the National University Autonomous of Mexico and did her pediatric residency at the National Institute of Pediatrics in Mexico. She received her PhD in Metabolism and Nutrient Gene Interactions from the University of Texas at Austin. After completing her postdoctoral training at the Pennington Biomedical Research Center, she continued her work as an associate scientist in the Human Genomics Laboratory and as co-director of the Cell Culture Core Facility. She later joined the faculty at Illinois and is a member of the Division of Nutritional Sciences at the Carle Illinois College of Medicine. In her current role, Dr. Teran Garcia conducts transdisciplinary research on obesity and other nutrition-related diseases, such as diabetes and hypertension among low-income populations. She works on promoting health and wellness among families of Hispanic heritage and translates evidence-based science to community-based programs that serve children and families in need. Her aim is to better understand the biological and psychological dimensions that could be modified in individuals and families to tailor more efficient and practical interventions to prevent obesity and chronic diseases. Thank you so much for sharing with us today, and whenever you're ready, please take it away.
Thank you very much for your introduction. Let me share my screen, and you tell me which one, if it is ready for you. Can you see it now? Perfect. Thank you so much again for the opportunity to talk about the work that we do. And I have this opportunity to discuss what is my concept of how to translate evidence-based information or not into practical terms. So being healthy is not something very new. The concept of positive health and trying to interact the interactions between the biology, the diet, the physical activity, the dietary patterns is something that has been discussed many years ago. And here is just a sample quote, but also wanted to make a note that the social determinants of health have been also investigated or recognized long time ago, because we know that with the season of the year, the change of the winds, the age of the individuals, and the situation that hits home will affect their health. So think about how we integrate the issues that we do towards giving an individual the opportunity to be the healthiest as possible as they can. So in this part, I wanted just to go back to what are my roots. I'm from Mexico. And in Mexico, they call us the race of the corn. You know, they are the child of the corn. And the corn is one of the most important cereals in the Mexican diets. It has been known since 10,000 years ago that the Mexicans were the first one who domesticated corn to make the cereal that is currently available for everybody. The first tortillas were done 65 100 years ago. So what it is that, they know how to mix an original teocintle, which was a very small corn, and it was transformed in the corn that we have right now. I will show you a little bit of picture of that. But the consumption of tortillas is the staple. Instead of using fork and knives, tortillas are used as part of the way to get a taco, and everybody knows about tacos, and it's an easy way to have a portable combination of my plate in a very simple portion. Now, another part that's very interesting to know that Mexico accounts for 42% of the world production of the United States. And guess what? The United States is 36%. It's because the population of Hispanics in the United States has been growing. And so that is very important. The process of nixtamalization, which is the process where corn is used to make the corn dough, is very important because it has an impact in the bioavailability of the food that is in the vitamins and the nutrients and the minerals that are in corn tortilla. So as I was telling you, there are at least 600 dishes that are elaborated from corn. And the original corn, this is the original corn that was like only 12 grains, that they were combined with the corn that we know that is a different type of plant to make the corn that we have right now. And from being one small section of 12 grains to have more than 500 or even 1,000 grains per ear of corn has been a lot of transition and selection, natural selection of colors and combinations of corn. And you know that, and you probably have seen wonderful stories in the more reports of how the production of corn has modernized and have a great impact in not only in the food that we consume, the food that animals consume, even the products of the gas that is used in the cars, right? So there are many byproducts of corn. One of them, which is also not that good, is high fructose corn syrup. So we talk about that a little bit later. But what I wanted to mention here is that just think about how we evolved to get from these colors and the byproducts that are in this type of corns. They have antioxidant properties, and they were known from the ancient Aztecs in how these products were very, very important. And as I was mentioning to you, the vitamin B3, the niacin, has been bioavailable by the process of nixtamalization, which means to grind and to put some calcium in the dough, let it boil and ferment for several hours to get the byproduct of the tortilla. And this is very interesting to understand that this is fortification of the food has helped to have individuals to have also vitamin A. There are many varieties of corn, as I was mentioning, that they have different type of elements that are important for health. So this process keeps happening even nowadays in many small communities where they grind the corn and they let it ferment for different hours. But these kernels of corn are also being used now in a processed food and in a way that to generate dry corn flour that everybody can consume and make their own corn tortillas. I just want to bring to your attention that the way that this lime and this cooking of corn in the ancient ways was very important because was making those corn tortillas to have even different properties. So there are plenty of papers about that, talking about if using processed or ultra processed corn tortillas versus handmade or small groups of corns that meals that are done in small batches has different properties. So this is important to take a consideration. So whenever I go for tacos in some places, so I prefer to wait a little bit more to wait handmade tortillas. It's a big difference. And this is something that is a process that is passed generation after generation. And in families that they still do the tortillas, the different sizes, different combinations of grains to learn how to make a good tortilla. Another part, and we're talking about this type of meal that is very important for the diet, is that since the time of the Aztecs, and this is the Mendoza Codex that was written in the 1600s, 1500s, after the conquer of Mexico by the Spaniards. They know and they have an idea of portion sizes, portion control, which is something that we don't know really how to apply to our healthy diet. But they know that if the kid was a small kid and they was not doing too much activity, they only will consume half of a tortilla versus an adult was eating up to 3 tortillas, depending of how much work. And you see here, if they were working in the farm and they were carrying things, they were able to eat more tortillas. And a warrior or somebody who has a different type of activities, they were eating more tortillas. As you were growing up, you were eating more tortillas. Think about that. Sometimes we ask our kids to eat like adults, and we modify their dietary habits early in life. So this is another consideration to recognize the ancient wisdom of our elders, and also to recognize the value that heritage foods brings to our diet. So currently, many places in Mexico, they use this type of corn dough, and they make their fresh tortillas in small factories by batches. Here in the States, we buy it from a big, in the grocery store, and we get these pre-packed tortillas that some of them is good, that is enriched with some additional vitamins, but some of them have additional additives that there shouldn't be there. So this is, again, nowadays in Mexico, they have a big campaign trying to save the tortilla to be the original tortilla without added products, to be part of the national heritage that is recognized in Mexico. Another part is that the tortilla is never eaten alone. Most of the occasions is combined with other grains, with legumes, with other byproducts to make a whole grain, a whole meal, and this is important. One interesting fact, and for some of you who wants to know a little more about the tacos, is that every place in Mexico, they might have their favorite taco. And there is a book called Tacography that tells every place what are the favorite feelings for the tacos. And of course, has to do with the regional products and the viability of foods. And thinking about sustainable, recognizing the sustainability, and I just want to bring to your attention the developmental goals from the WHO is to have sustainability of the products that we have and decreasing our carbon footprint. And this is important because, like in example, in the Mayan Peninsula in Mexico, avocado is very common. And instead of having pork, they have access to venison. And that venison meat is used to make some of those tacos. So every region might have a different byproducts of what they're used as a favorite filling for their tacos. These are just an example of small types of tacos that I was talking about it. And the feature that you are having right now in the Bevier Cafe is called Tacos al Pastor. And as the United States is a big multicultural ground, the Tacos al Pastor represents a very interesting multicultural background in Mexico. They were imported when the Lebanese a Lebanese group of individuals migrated to Mexico, and they established themselves there. They were Christians, and they were able to eat pork meat. And instead of having tortillas, at the same time, they have pita bread. And then they adapt their dish that they were used, that the shawarma gyros that you might have seen in other situations, they adapted where it was locally available in Mexico. The red color comes from annatto plants, the achiote plant, who has a very important antioxidant properties. The combination of a product that was very common over there was the pineapple, who has digestive enzymes. Coriander, that is important again because it's very staple in Mexico and helps for the digestion. So all those kind of elements that are in the tortilla are talking about how we multiculturally adapt to the elements that are in the region. And those are some of the nutrients that are available when you think about a taco al pastor, what are the things that they have. And those nutrients, those sources are balanced to provide an adequate intake of nutrients without exaggerating, because some people want to have 10 or 20 tacos, but portion control, as we were talking about, is very important. Now, talking about what type of salsas are used in Mexico, there are many, many varieties of salsas. But if you use the traditional green salsa that is used in this type of tacos, they use avocado, and avocado is rich in potassium, folic acid, antioxidants, and fiber. And in fact, we have published in collaboration with several professors at the University of Illinois of the impact of an avocado diet to improve your lipid profile. So salsa is a very common staple in the Mexican food, and we know that using green tomatoes or red tomatoes, or cooking or not cooking those salsas, has an impact in the bioavailability of nutrients that people use. Also, depending on what kind of additional herbs change the flavor, and those are typical combinations in Mexico, because you always put a different type of salsa on top of your onions, your cilantro, and your lime, and everything else. So as I was mentioning, you know that Mexico is the country of the chili peppers, and there are many varieties of chili peppers, and every variety of chili pepper can be used for different type of preparations of salsas, going from the highest, the spiciest one, like the habanero, the scorpion peppers, to the very colorful ones that you can see here growing at the Idea Garden in Illinois. So there are beautiful chili peppers, and they are spicy. So those is a very good opportunity to explore other properties of chili peppers that the people use. But why we care, right? What is important? Well, salsa, cooking tomatoes, is a nutrition in a bowl. It has the availability of lycopene, which is the vitamin A precursor, is bigger when you cook tomatoes. That you know that it is well known that it is important to have vitamin A to decrease your risk of cardiovascular disease and metabolic disease. And this is important because that transition that we have in Mexico from the original diet that was really higher, low in animal protein, the consumption of animal proteins was low and has been increasing. The amount of vegetable fats are increasing also. And the other part of the carbohydrates has been changing, and the consumption of sugars has been increasing. And if you think about over the years, this change in the percentage of the total daily per capita consumption of food has been affecting and resulting in the increased prevalence of obesity, and obesity in children and in adults. The type of carbohydrates that they were consumed, that they have a higher fiber, because there were traditional products and staples in the different regions, has decreased because they convert in ultra processed foods. And nothing is wrong with processing the food to have a longer shelf life, but at the same time, decreasing the consumption of traditional staples has a huge impact. The same thing for the amount of vegetable fats that has been increased in the consumption, and it has an impact in that transition, nutrition transition, who has in the long term an impact of the metabolic outcome of individuals. So there are many also cultural beliefs about health and weight. Traditionally, because there was not enough staples in some areas, that they were really suffering of a scarcity of support and money, a heavy child was considered well fed and well taken care for the parents. And if you have a chubby baby, it was healthy and it would be okay to grow their weight. But there is also the belief that if they can run and play, is healthy despite of their weight. Now we recognize that we indulge, parents that are overindulgent have an impact in the way that the kids recognize portions and the dietary patterns that they establish early in life. Another part that this is also talk about among the families, that if their obesity is running into families, there is nothing you can do about it, without recognizing that genetics is not deterministic, but you can modify your genetic predisposition by having a healthy diet, what we call right now epigenetic changes. So what we're trying to do is to, in my current work is to how to change and adapt that recognition of the culture that can be used to modify the way that we do the dietary adaptations. And it is well known that in the United States, they want to put Hispanics as a whole group. And they don't recognize the difference between Cuban, Mexican, Puerto Rican, Central Americans. And it is also in a recent publication recognized that Mexicans that are arrived in early stages of their arrival and before complete acculturation to the United States, they have higher dietary index in contrast with other countries. And that is important to recognize when we do interventions in the community. So we cannot say this is a group of Hispanics without recognizing the different places where they come. And you can see Puerto Ricans, for many cultural reasons also, they have the lowest score in the healthy eating index. And that is, again, recognizing where is an opportunity for intervention. The longer the individuals stay in the United States, and you can see here, if you have more than 10 years in the United States, your consumptions of beans and red meats decrease. And in contrast of when you were an early arrival to the United States. The consumption of also fries and soft drinks is also affected by the years on the United States. And those are kind of things that have to be consideration, because those elements, again, we need to recognize the opportunities of early intervention. And this is an interesting paper that I'm just not going to discuss completely, but why it's important to take these dietary patterns as an opportunity of intervention, because the burden of obesity is affecting mainly individuals of Hispanic and non-Hispanic Blacks in a higher proportion. And it's not only in adults, but also in children. And it's an issue that is affecting even the ability how they perform in the school. So this is something that we have to consider when we do plan an intervention and trying to apply and transform the evidence base of information. And the increase of caloric intake above of the needs of the individual, depending on the life stage, those are the things that we have to put a big attention. We know that diet-induced obesity is affecting the ability of our body to produce triglycerides, which are the products that are circulating in our body and bring around fatty acids. And if we have a saturation of these carriers of fatty acids, we can have lipogenic deposition of fat in excess in places where we don't need it. That's one of the reasons that fatty liver disease, cardiovascular disease, sarcopenia, and when the muscle is replaced with fat, has an impact in the metabolic ability of an individual to develop either cardiovascular disease or diabetes. And we recognize that the genetic part is not the only thing, but the environment is important. And those elements of the sociocultural factors that interact with the genotype can make an individual to have more prone to develop cardiovascular disease. So we have been studying from an approach from cell to society, what are the impact of those genetic markers that may be related and modifiable early in life. And one of the projects I collaborate in Illinois is with the Strong Kids Project. This project aims to look into the genetic biological characteristics in children as they grow up, and how we can identify early markers that modify the satiety or the appetite control. One of our papers was talking about that the more risk alleles you have, the chances of having a higher BMI percentile. And the distribution of those genetic markers follows like a regular curve, a Gaussian curve, where you have, few individuals who have the less allele of risk and few individuals who have more risk alleles. But what we can see is that the more risk alleles you have, the higher probability of having a high BMI percentile. And we don't stop only that, because we know that genes don't act by themselves, and they interact with the microbiome. and the diet and the ability of our bacteria to make products like this short-chain fatty acids. They talk to the gut. They talk with the adipose cell, the adipocytes, and they can have an impact in how we regulate our appetite and how we make a deposition of the fatty acids. So these are some of the projects that we're talking about, that some predispositions might then you to have that opportunity to have the risk to accumulate more fatty acids or more fat in your body. But if you modify with diet and early interventions, you can decrease that risk. That is our final goal. So going back to the tacos, is that also thinking about that depending on what is your diet, you might have different predisposition of how to store or what kind of fatty acids are the products in your body. And this is a recent paper that is not ours, but they talk about that the metabolites in the microbiome might be different between those that eat pork or eat chicken. Very interesting, right? And you put that in also in the context of the different products that we eat in the traditional Mexican diet, like the pickled pain, like the purslane, that the amaranth, that the beetroots, all of them may have different chemical compounds that they have an impact as a functional ingredients, and they have an impact on health. Some of these products have been related right now to be a protection of the production of the free radicals, which in turn can affect the proliferation of tumors. So that, again, this is one of the well-known anti-carcinogenic opportunities when you eat the diet that is rich in fruit and veggies, because those products that give the color to the foods, and that's why we recommend have your plate full of colors, will protect you for other diseases. Again, we try to translate this evidence-based information in some practical implications. Now, remember, our body is not working by itself. Whatever of these, the byproducts of this bacteria, they talk with the brain. They have a conversation with those neurotransmissions that they might affect how we regulate our mood, our ability to be able to learn faster or not, or even to have the opportunity to have a happy adulthood, and even prevent some of the diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson. Again, it's a healthy diet, right? If you do a healthy diet, you prevent the opportunity to have free radicals, to have cardiovascular disease, to have a higher risk of problems. And this is just, again, from this very nice review. They talk about how these transmitters also produce some short-chain fatty acids, and they talk with the bacteria, and they might have a relationship of how we talk, again, with the brain. And they promote the motility of the intestine, they promote the healthy gut, the irritability for, irritable bowel disease, and all those kind of things can have an impact on the inflammation that might happen at the level of the gut. So whenever we something, we have to consider who is going to eat and how they're going to eat it. And when we talk about the concept of personalized nutrition, we'll have to figure out which individuals, depending of their preferences, depending of their ability to metabolize and make some of these byproducts viable to their body, they will have an impact of, being healthy or not. And we talk about, when we want to prevent obesity, we need to think about mental health, how this is going to be affecting the situation where you are eating, how you are eating, do you have access to the food, what is the marketing of the product that is going to you, because all of these elements might affect your ability to store adipose tissue when you don't need it. And many of the projects that I have been collaborating over the years here in Illinois are related to think about how we do health and wellness across the life cycle, and doing the things that we do from children, from cell to society, for babies to adults, and thinking about how we translate what we know in our research area to the community. And this is very important, because I have some projects and some collaborations that are international and local or across the state that are trying to figure out how we help them individuals to be healthier. And that is my final goal. I'm just going to give you, because I have many collaborators, a little overview of some of the projects of two of my graduate students. when they were talking about the ability of modifying the diet and the, that we eat with the genetic predisposition to develop obesity or prevent obesity or cardiovascular disease. And we have a project about dyslipidemia, and we were trying to identify if there were any kind of genetic markers associated to dyslipidemia, because we know that when an individual has an accumulation of body fat, they might have risk to develop these problems with the lipid metabolism. And one of the fatty acids that we eat, and we have a lot of research to do, is to think about how the genetics has an impact in our, again, the outcomes. I'm not going to talk about too much about this part, but I'm going to talk about the big controversy about omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. And we know that in a current diet, we have less consumption of omega-3 fatty acids and more consumption of omega-6 fatty acids. And that it was inversely proportional in ancient populations. You recognize, everybody talks about, the good fatty acids and the bad fatty acids. Well, it's not everything good and bad, but it's a balance. And what is important to recognize is that depending on what you eat and depending on your genetic markers, you might have the ability with the enzymes that are involved in these pathways to make the production on the byproducts of pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory elements. And this is important when we think about how do we balance the diet. Also think about that the gatekeepers, these enzymes that are here, are opening or closing the faucet to metabolize and make these products that will have an impact in health. On top of that, and this is just, bringing the genetics back to it, is that some of these enzymes at the level of the genome, the human genome, they are very interestingly located like backwards. The regulatory region is common to these two enzymes that are very important. And when the products, the promoter region, the regulatory region of these enzymes is promoting the production of one, is suppressing the production of the other one. So just like a little bit of food for thought, I'm just going to bring it to also that the ability of individuals to have different representation of this risk or protective alleles might be very different between African or Indians or Japanese individuals compared to Mexicans in the United States or our collaborators that we have in San Luis Potosí, and they have, you see, an inverse proportion of the frequency of the alleles, and that in turn has an impact on how you have different levels of triglycerides or different levels of low density lipoproteins, the ones that give you trouble, giving you more risk of having a heart attack. So those are the things that we're trying to investigate and recognize in the translation of this information, because if you have more consumption of or less consumption of omega-3 fatty acids, that relationship associated with your genotype can affect the impact on your risk of having a higher or lower low density lipoproteins. So this is in general what I was trying to mention, but important to recognize this. And so what? Who cares? What are we doing to eat and the recommendations that we translate to individuals? Because at the very end, individuals will tell you, I cannot live without tortillas, right? And it's better for me to eat corn or flour tortillas. Well, I go back to your ancient genome. If you know what is in your history and the history of your families, you want to modulate your diet, because that's why there are general dietary recommendations, and you can adapt it to your personal environment and your ability to get some types of foods. And what we do is to translate this impact in something that might have an influence on changing what are the recommendations of eating more than fruits and veggies, decrease the time of watching TV, playing more, limit the consumption of sugar, sweet beverages. But in reality, many kids don't, they consume more than 5 sweets and sugar sweet beverages. They watch more than 5 hours of TV. They don't do physical activity, and they increase the consumption of fruits and veggies is not really well known because they have many ways that, you know, we don't measure it right. So our project with Abriendo Caminos has demonstrated that by doing an intervention that is culturally appropriate, we increase the consumption of vegetables and we have an impact that is more sustainable. And by recognizing the value of being bicultural and bilingual, you bring to the table elements that are very important for the families. They feel that recognize and acknowledge the diversity, and the parents feel empowered to implement those dietary changes that will do in turn a very good impact on the health of the kids. So I think in the part that I want to bring you, like the message is that we need to embrace the cultures and the gastronomies, what they bring to us with these traditional dishes, adapt the impact of those dishes in our diet, and recognize the value they bring, and also will have the ability to recognize that opportunity to recognize our diversity and the things they bring to the table, and how we can take advantage of that knowledge in translating and doing implementation science for other individuals, and thinking about that how our research has a big impact in the people that we serve. So those are my notes and my comments. I know I went a little bit fast on the genetics and other things, but my take-home message is that it's very important to be bicultural, bilingual, recognize the differences that we have in order to grow better together. And I don't know if you have any questions or comments.
Yeah, thank you, Margarita, for your talk. It was super interesting to see all this, like back to the Aztecs and all the ancient cultures, and it was really amazing to see like the cartoon with the portions, because that's that's something. It depends on your physical activity and everything. So yeah, I don't know, I have a question so about that. So do you think, I mean, not that in particular, but like how that changes the nutrition of the Hispanic people moving to the US? In my case, for instance, moving from Spain, something that I find more challenging is that, for instance, finding fresh food, the price of fresh food is much higher here. And there are less availability as when even in Europe, or if you go, for instance, to Mexico, that is everywhere in the market. So do you think it's just maybe availability or price that changes the diet, or maybe is that kind of blending in, that you're coming from a foreign place and then you come here and then you just want to kind of blend in with the rest of the people, and then that's why it changes the diet?
Well, there are many, and I appreciate your comment. There are many factors that influence what we eat and how we eat, right? But one thing is very important is that the social desirability to be assimilated is one thing that is important, that changed in many, and the convenience of having maybe recent immigrants too many hours of working, or working 2 jobs or 3 jobs, changed the opportunity to have homemade meals. And that is trying to recognize that this is very important. And people get the tendency that, oh, I can afford this, therefore I deserve to have fast food or go to a restaurant, and it's more convenient to do that. We also waste a lot of the products because we don't know how to preserve or how to cook them early. And there is also the misconceptions that if we only get fresh fruits and veggies, that will be the only thing that we can eat, without recognizing that some of the frozen products without preservatives are harvested at the peak of the season, and they had the similar nutritional value. There's also the misconception that only the organic food is good for you. And for me, it's very painful to hear mothers that say, well, I don't give my kids apples or bananas because I cannot afford them when they are not organic. And also only once in a while I buy those products because I cannot afford the organic ones. So there's a lot of education that need to do. Now, the other part that you were mentioning is the convenience, right? And the variability of different varieties of products that you are not familiar with them, I'm not familiar with them. How do we cook it? Have you ever tried? You know, what is the rutabaga? What is the colabavi? It's something that this is not very common in the Mexican diet. So going the part of what we do in extension, education, giving the opportunity to everybody to try different dishes and recognize different type of products, right? Eggplants are common in Mexico, but not everybody knows how to cook it. Once they try, they love it. Chickpeas, hummus, all those kind of things is, again, recognizing that we can change and adapt new products instead of going always to the same ones. And the other question you were asking was about the how we change, right? How do we change? Because it's not easy to pay for them. And it is important, again, to remove the misconception that eating healthier is expensive, but we need to learn how to adapt the products that are on during the season, you know, that are cheaper, and also, again, to recognize opportunities to make variety in the food that we eat. I don't know if I answer all the questions because you have several at the same time.
Yeah, that's that. I think I'm going to borrow this for my children, this poster, because they always want to eat the same amount, and I'm like, yeah, what did you do today? How many hours did you watch your iPad? So
yeah, it's very important to the kids to recognize the signals of satiety. To one of the guidelines that I give when again, my training as a pediatrician helps me to do some kind of common things. So say the kids, how big is your fist? Well, think about how big is your tummy. You want to have your tummy as big as a balloon, or you want to have your tummy as a fist that is, you know, the size of 1 or 2 or 3 fists size, and you can move after that. Because if you want to eat until you cannot move, that is not healthier for you. So those are the things that we do in nutrition education, or telling kids, you know, remember a slice of pizza is according to the size of your hand, right? That will be your portion. How many people eat half pizza or quarter of a pizza? So again, those type of balance is the calories. It's not only the calories in and the calories out, but also the balance we have in our biology and the type of food we're eating. I don't know if you have any other questions.
yeah, well, I was it's very intriguing always to me, the genetic and then the microbiota part of the because I've read like multiple articles about how we are losing the population of our microbiota in the intestines, like after generation of generation, we are kind of losing. I don't know if what is the reason is that maybe the antibiotics we're using, is that something related with the nutrition, and that kind of affects all, like, yeah, as you mentioned, right, it just affects all our organism because how we assimilate food. And so is that something that you also study, like what type of microorganisms we have, if we're losing it, if that kind of
yeah, with Dr. Sharon Donovan, one of the projects that we do is about the microbiome and what type of are the byproducts of this bacteria. And just to make it life easier, for everybody, it's called the bacteria B and the bacteria F. The B or bacteroidetes, the lactobacillus, are the good ones, right? And I say B as a bueno in Mexico, in Spanish, right? And the F as the firmicutes, or the ones that are associated with fat absorption. So that is kind of a good way to remember the type of bacterial populations. That is not the only one, but it's a big, you know, in a big picture, that the unbalance what we have is because we don't have diversity in our diet. So the decreasing the diversity of the bacteria has an impact in the way that the bacteria talk to each other. There are so many. There are more genetic materials and more cells in our gut than in our own, the whole organism. It's got to an exponential level. But thinking about those elements is very important, because how those bacteria's products talk with our own cells to send signals of satiety. And by not having diversity in our diet, how we modify that variability in those bacteria, who can really talk to each other the more they are. And the more diversity we have, the healthier is our gut. And one of the products that is well known is like propionate or butyrate. Those short, we were talking about those short chain fatty acids, are the ones who maintain the health and the integrity of the gut and the membranes. And you probably have here one thing that is called the leaky gut, products that they break down the mucin, the protection of the layer of the gut, and they are affecting the irritability or the transposition of other bacteria that might have a consequential and metabolic effects on our body. So we're trying to recognize that kids when are fed by formula or by breastfeeding, they have also different proportion of those bacteria, and how this also affects the ability to accumulate more fat or less, and to grow into a healthier growth trajectory. So more on that, but we are working with with Sharon Donovan in her laboratory, trying to understand that interplay in the transition of the diet, in the weaning, and the microbiome, and the crosstalk with our genome, and how those affect our predisposition to gain excessive fat in our body.
So that's over an individual's lifetime, or is like over generations?
Well, it's an individual's lifetime when we follow those kids, because we have been following kids from pregnancy of the kids until they're 5, 6. Right now, they're going to be some of them 7 years old. So seeing about those trajectories, but also over generations. Are we eat more processed food, and are we decrease the variability of food that we have? This has been, as you have seen, over generation, 70% of the population are affected by overweight or obesity. And there was not like that 30 or 40 years ago. No, 30 years ago, we start to have problems. But, but in the 1960s or in the 1970s, those kind of problems, they were not so evident. There were extremes in the population, but there was not so much overweight and obesity as is nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I even read, I don't know, like years ago, an article that even like babies that were born through like the birth canal over the ones that had a C-section, the ones that went through the birth canal, they had like, they took some of the microorganism from the mother and had like a richer population of like good bacteria.
And actually, one of the things they're doing in Europe right now is that they wipe the face of the kids that are born by cesarea with the secretion of the vagina of the mother.
Oh, okay.
It's one of the things that they have been doing, trying to colonize the face of that baby with the bacteria of the vagina of the mother, to see how does affect their weight gain over life. So this is very interesting, because we still are recognizing and learning about what is that impact. Early use of antibiotics decrease the variability of bacteria, predispose the production of more acetate and accumulation of body fat. So this is one of the things that is very important to recognize, that the abuse of antibiotics is not good for the variability and the health of our gut and the bacteria in our gut. Yes.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you so much. And I thought it was really cool, this slide where you showed sort of the dish you picked out, and then you listed all the ingredients and then talked about the sort of like things that all of those different ingredients do. And I thought it was really cool to see a list like this, because even often if you're trying to like understand what's in a recipe, like often nutritional facts are contained in like something that's sort of produced homogenously. So it's hard to like kind of understand and know things that you make at home and things that come from all different like ingredients. So it's just really cool to see this laid out, to see like, look at all the different ingredients and what are these sort of like different beneficial things from those ingredients. Yeah, I just thought it was really cool to be able to like visualize that. And I hadn't seen that kind of way of looking at like what's on your plate before. I thought it was really cool.
Thank you very much. And I think it's important to recognize that our dietary patterns are very variable, And we have to recognize the value of every dietary pattern because every culture brings something different in their dietary patterns to the table.
Yeah, are there more questions for Dr. Teran? Yeah, I find it like very interesting in terms of nutrition. Our first speaker, Dr. Pepino from Food Sciences, she was also talking about, it was more on the, like the sense, I mean, of the, how the kids, how like feeding different like flavors to the kids when you're young, they kind of are like more used to, especially vegetables, right? That is like what parents, we kind of struggle more to get like children with those. So
well, and recognizing broccoli, right? Broccoli, some people, and cilantro, some people don't like cilantro, but it's genetic predisposition because they taste like soap for some individuals.
Yeah,
it tastes like soap, and it's related to a gene receptor.
I think somebody else was talking about that too. For me, cilantro is also like very, it feels very strong, even if it's like a little bit, I can feel it super strong, like cilantro. So I think it's just in my side that from in Spain, we don't use a lot of species or anything. It's kind of, people call it like little like bland food. It's just like basically the ingredients and that's it. So
Yeah,
that's kind of, and
very,
then spices and everything too. Yeah, also like very interesting. You didn't talk a lot about the hot part of the Mexican cuisine, because I think that's also kind of has, I had many years ago when I was in grad school. I had a Mexican colleague in Spain who was working with capsaicin, like with the components of the hot, and that had like also an impact on like kind of the digestion and the metabolism in Mexican diet, right? That some people.
I didn't talk about the anti-inflammatory properties and the ability to facilitate the digestion and the metabolism of proteins, because that breaks down proteins, and this is very important. And so I just didn't want to get too much in the traditional chili route because everybody talks about chili peppers and you know how good they are, but they also facilitate the bioavailability of iron, because vitamin C, if you put vitamin C with meat that is coming with the lime juice that you are adding here, you facilitate that the iron from the meat is absorbed better. So that's the reason when the people have to take iron pills, they ask them to drink it with a glass of orange juice to facilitate the absorption of iron. So those are the kind of things that, you know, and Mexican salsas has all these capsaicin that is anti-inflammatory, anti-carcinogenic. The sensation of satisfaction is very important. So yeah, there are so many things there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very interesting, yeah. So if maybe there are no other questions for Dr. Teran, thank you for joining us today and telling all about this Mexican Hispanic food culture in US. And it's very interesting, all these projects that you have with Hispanic populations in the community.
Yeah. And if somebody has an additional projects that they want to help to translate to direct to the population, I'm happy to listen to your ideas, because that's in part of what we want to translate the information generated at the university to make it accessible to the public.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.